Hey everybody, it's Rothbard's Disciple here, and I want to give you guys a short video explaining different Turing concepts. And the Turing concepts I want to explain are the differences between Turing machines, Turing completeness, and Turing deciders. Just so you guys know, there's actually, I'm not a complete expert in this topic. I just wanted to talk about this at a basic level for the layman, so they could understand some basic concepts on this, because it's kind of it's a very simple concept: Turing machines and Turing completeness. A Turing machine, just so you guys know, and this is the basis of all of this stuff here, is a Turing machine is just a machine that can simulate any computer algorithm, no matter how complicated the algorithm is. Okay, so a Turing machine can just basically complete any problem that can be completed, right? So if you're talking about a Turing machine, all you fundamentally need, this is something that Alan Turing came up with way back in the day, is he said all you need is a tape where you can place symbols within boxes, and then you need some sort of thing that can read the boxes on the tape and then move to different places on the tape. Okay, so if you look at something like this looks very similar to a blockchain, and the symbols on the tape could either be the blocks themselves or the transactions within each block, and you can get it down a lot more simpler than that. But just by looking at this, it's quite obvious that Bitcoin is a Turing machine, and so this might come as a surprise to some of you guys, because you might be like, well, I've heard people like Nick Szabo say Bitcoin's not Turing complete, and Vitalik Buterin say Bitcoin's not Turing complete, and that's because Turing completeness and the Turing machine are not exactly the same thing. Because when Alan Turing came up with this in 1936, they didn't, computers weren't a thing, you know what I mean? And so when they talked about computers, they weren't talking about digital computers. Okay, when they're talking about is something a Turing machine or not, like the way Nick Szabo and Vitalik Buterin talk about it, they're talking about the programming language. Is the programming language Turing complete? Okay, and so that's a separate problem. But for Alan Turing, these computers within the box, like this could even be a person. Like he in some of the things that he's written, he would be like, you would give a book with instructions to a person, and then that person would be your computer. Okay, so whether or not something is a Turing machine is independent of its programming language in the first place. Okay, so that seems kind of stupid to say and esoteric to argue, but it's sort of true, and we're going to actually go over this at the end of this. The one thing that I've always said on this channel is I've always hated smart contracts. I think they're stupid and retarded, for the simple reason that, for me, what a smart contract was when you used a human as the computer in the Turing machine. Now, I did not come from a computer science background. I had some basic understanding of computer science, so I've been learning a lot about this recently. But for me, the smart contracts within Bitcoin were where you did something off-chain, where a human altered a file, okay, and there was contracts between humans, okay. So like Vitalik Buterin and Nick Szabo and the Ethereum crowd and those guys, the Bitcoin Core crowd, they want to do everything automatically through programming it, like some sort of matrix things where the machines rule all or something. I don't know. It seems sort of stupid to me, just because for me, what Bitcoin does is it allows businesses to be built in new ways, and you have contracts between people. So for me, the Turing machine that is Bitcoin was always supposed to be the computer is supposed to be a person. That's where I think all the cool things with Bitcoin happen, and I'm going to go ahead and show you guys that later on. The only things that I see that you can have automated with Bitcoin are monetary payments, and it's not like you can automate your investing schedule so that you make a shitload of money. That's just a lie. You still have to program in a good investing algorithm, you know what I mean? But anyways, so Bitcoin is a Turing machine. We've already proved this. The blockchain basically is the tape, and you can look at any transaction on the blockchain through SPV. So you could have your tape go from one transaction to the next and just follow instructions from one transaction to the next with different rule sets posted as text on the Bitcoin transaction. But anyways, going on to Turing completeness, and this is the stuff that Nick Szabo and Vitalik Buterin like to talk about all the time, and this stuff, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you're talking about Bitcoin. When they talk about Bitcoin's Turing, whether it's Turing complete, they're talking about the scripting algorithm. So with Ethereum was created so that there would be a programming language built on top of Ethereum that allows you to do things like looping functions, and a programming language that's Turing complete. It can simulate any Turing machine. The problems with Turing complete languages is that there's a halting problem with Turing complete languages. You have to be able to do loops and things like that, and you don't always know if your program's going to stop. Okay, and so this becomes a problem in something like Bitcoin, because with Bitcoin, every transaction and all this computation that you have done by the nodes, that takes a lot of resources because there's thousands of nodes on the network. It's not like just doing a computation on your own personal computer where you're only wasting your own personal computer's computation resources. With Bitcoin, you waste everybody's computation resources, okay? And so the issue with this is that if you have looping functions, it's going to cost a lot of money and things like that. So the way Ethereum and the Nick Szabo crowd have to get around this is by creation of something like gas, and they basically, I don't know, Ethereum's basically like a centrally planned cryptocurrency to a large extent, especially once they move to proof of stake. But it doesn't really make any sense here, because why? Like, if you have such trouble putting loops on the blockchain, why are you doing them on the blockchain? You know what I mean? If a blockchain is something that you want to use scarcely, then why are you putting so much stuff on the blockchain? And a sort of validation of this fact is, think about the fact, or like what goes on during the mining process. Do you know, like, the amount of hashes that are actually hashed in the process of Bitcoin mining is absolutely insane. If you wanted to put all the information and all the computation on a blockchain, you would have put all the computation for the mining process on the blockchain. But all they do is they put the one hash that proves that the mining happened, and that one hash is the hash that wins the block. It's the block that is the wins the Coinbase transaction. That has the leading number of zeros, the golden hash, as they call it. But with something like Bitcoin, all you do is you put proof of something that happened off-chain. So all of the Bitcoin mining that happens, nobody can actually prove that, other than the fact that with the golden hash, you can only get that golden hash as a certain probability depending on its difficulty. So through the golden hash, you can trust that everything in Bitcoin has happened correctly, because otherwise they wouldn't have been able to get that golden hash. So they don't put anything on the Bitcoin blockchain for mining except the hash. And if you think about how complex mining is, it's absolutely insane. Okay, and so this is the way that you actually want to build your applications on top of Bitcoin. You don't want to follow the Vitalik Buterin and Nick Szabo route, and you don't want to, overload your nodes with all this unnecessary, irrelevant information. All you put for your nodes to post on a blockchain is the absolute necessary information, just proof that something has happened. Okay, and so what Bitcoin actually is it's something called a Turing decider, and a Turing decider it's a machine that always halts. And so the whole purpose of this is that, again, a machine that always halts means it never gets stuck looping infinitely. Okay, so if it never gets stuck looping infinitely, you don't need anything like gas, because you know that at some point the transaction is going to stop. Like whatever you're doing through Bitcoin transactions, whatever program you're running, there's a finite number of transactions that you need. Okay, so you know the price of it. Okay, there's a price to it because there's a price to your transaction. So obviously you're still limited in what you can do, and you still want to do things economically, but because it always halts, you're never running into this problem where you need gas or anything like that. Okay, you don't run into a lot of these issues. Okay, and so what you actually do with Bitcoin, though, is because Bitcoin's scripting language doesn't do any loops, if you need something that has to do a loop, or that might be a problem that might not be able to be solved, you do it off-chain, okay? And even those problems that you can solve, you don't put the proof of, like you don't put the steps on the blockchain, okay? You keep absolutely everything off the blockchain except the final product, like the final execution of whatever it is, the program that you're doing, okay? And so the reason why I want to, or I said at the start, we're going to talk about using a human as the computer in a Turing machine, is because, again, Vitalik Buterin and Nick Szabo, they're getting this wrong, because you don't, like, the language is not important in Bitcoin, okay? Especially because if you consider having, like, if you just put proof of execution on the blockchain, with Bitcoin Cash, like, what is the programming language that you can use? It's any programming language that exists, right? Any programming language that exists off the blockchain. Just prove it, put the hash, like hashed proof, zero knowledge proof, and put hashes of that on the blockchain. Easy as pie. Done. Okay, so with something like Ethereum, what's the programming language you got to use? Solidity. Okay, that sucks. Okay, you only have one. It makes no sense. Obviously, maybe there's some slight advantages to having Solidity to the blockchain, but there's a lot of huge disadvantages. One of them is security. There's a lot of wallet hacks too, and things that happen on Ethereum because it's just a lot more complex. But going back to this Turing machine with a human as the computer. Okay, so you guys remember how I had my my card game, right, for this the board game for the sci-fi fantasy story that I'm writing. Well, beyond the board game that goes to that, the way I've built this, the way, just a second here, I got to plug in charger into my headset before it goes out. But the way I've built this entire project for myself is there's a main storyline, right? So there's a main it's almost like Dragon Ball Z storyline, where there, or like Avatar, where there's like 4 seasons of this this show that goes on, but there's all these products that I would want to sell with the show as well. And so I've already shown you guys, you know, a couple board games or a couple board game characters and whatnot. Now I'm going to show you guys something that would be more like the Galaxy Guide, or the Guide to the Galaxy. Okay, so this is supposed to be a sci-fi story on some galaxy, some distant galaxy, right? And so I'm supposed to have information for all the characters that live in this galaxy. Okay, and by itself, I understand that this book, like this Guide to the Galaxy book, it has no interest to anybody unless the main storyline of this TV show that I'm writing would sell. So obviously this book by itself, you're going to look at it and be like, this isn't that exciting. I know that, but if you have a hit TV show that's on a galaxy, some distant, you know, sci-fi fantasy galaxy, the kids who are into that show will want to learn about that galaxy. And so this does sell. I know this because I have a bunch of old Star Wars Guide to the Galaxy books. So I bought, you know, I didn't buy those. I had my parents buy those for me when I was a kid. But anyways, I have a bunch of these pictures of these different characters or these different species in the sci-fi galaxy. And all these pictures, I need them all. I need the IP rights to these. And again, just so you guys know, my beliefs on IP rights are it's not so much theft as fraud. And you'll see later on that through using a blockchain, I can actually sell this idea to other people, so that even if I never get this idea to market, if someone can change this idea fundamentally and get it to market, they can actually take it to market themselves and just give me a small percentage of it, like as, you know, for the work I've done. But what the blockchain does is it will allow me, by acting as the human computer in this Turing machine for this project that I need to create, it'll allow me to create contracts with other humans to manipulate my digital data. And once this is done, then we can place that transaction to the blockchain. And again, if we go back to this, you know, a Turing decider, again, it's a machine that always halts. This doesn't answer the question, like, because there's a halting problem within computer science, just so you all know. The halting problem within computer science is why sometimes you get stuck in infinite loops and whatnot, because you don't know if every problem can be solved. So even though Bitcoin always halts, you don't know if the problems you're trying to solve off-chain can halt. So these problems that I'm bringing up right here of these people, like I need them to create a book for this species, I need them to create artwork for this planet. For each one of these species, there's also an associated planet or moon that they're supposed to be, that the species comes from. It's their, you know, their home planet and whatnot. And so it's supposed to just be a sort of pretty cool book that shows the differences between the species and whatnot that are within this galaxy. And the species can be sometimes pretty magical, and there's a wide variety, right? So there's supposed to be about 100 species and 100 planets, and then you have the humans and the human planets, and there's a lot of those. So there's a lot of work here, right? But for each one of these species that I have here, and I'm only going to show you about half a dozen or so, but for each one of these species that I have, there's a couple pages of text as well. And so what I can actually do with the blockchain, and this is one application that I've been trying to get programmers and application developers to create, but nobody will. So I'm going to show you how to do it manually. But what I've been trying to get app developers to create are just things that hash these items out. and then you can put these hashes on the blockchain, because all these files that I showed you, and they're not the full files. I only showed you the first pages of the files. Some are only 1 page long, others are like up to 3 or 4. But anyways, all of these files are files that I've created, and I just want to prove publicly that I've created these at some certain point in time. So what I do is I actually hash these files. So here's a list of all the files I have here. Each one of these is one of the different species that I have created, as well. It's the file of that species, and all these associated words that go along with it. But anyways, I hash this file, and what I can do with this now is I hash this file and I hash it on the blockchain. Now, this is my Memo account, okay? And so with Memo, again, I've had my issues with Memo because they don't use hashes, but this is how you would actually use hashes onto a blockchain. And if I'm pretty sure you can look this up on the blockchain itself. I might actually post this after I create this video. I haven't done it already. But all of these hashes right here, as you can see, they line up actually with the hashes that I created for all my files. So all I've done by posting these to the blockchain is I can say from now on, like if someone tries to steal these images or this idea through my video, and just so you guys know, like I said before, none of these ideas will ever sell unless you have the storyline to the story I'm creating. So that's why I can put these out publicly. So I'm not recommending to anyone necessarily put out publicly your own private work. I'm just saying I'm purposefully picking what I'm putting out publicly so that nobody can really take this. But even if they did, so like if someone tried to take my idea or something and sell it, I can point to the blockchain right here and I can say, hey, look, at this point in time I had this file that hashed out to this. I still have this file. It still hashes out to that right there. So this is my idea. I created it first, or I at least created it at this point in time. And so then it goes to the person who stole my idea to try and prove that they had it before this point in time. You know what I mean? And then the thing that becomes really big about this is as soon as people start using this sort of widely, it will become the industry standard. And so for this sort of an application here, again, I am acting as the computer in this Turing machine, but for this sort of application here, like the amount of things it can be used for is insane, because you can use this for every person who's a writer of anything that gets written, whether it's academic work, whether it's like Hollywood, whether it's like, books, it doesn't matter. Anything that gets done on video, whether it's YouTube, TV, whether it's movies, any sort of audio files, whether it's audio books, whether it's music, it doesn't matter. The creators of these files can post them to a blockchain, and then after they've posted them, again, these things that I've created, they are not done yet, guys. They are not done yet whatsoever. So if like let's go ahead and let's look at one of these right here. So this is a species right here called the Uruk, and just so you guys know, these pictures I took are straight from Google, so if I were to try to use this, it would be some sort of copyright violation. I actually think this picture is a picture of like the ancient Sith from Star Wars. The species, the Uruk, are sort of modeled after them to some extent. I take a lot of things from a lot of different stories and storylines. But anyways, these Uruk here, obviously if that picture is a picture of the ancient Sith species from Star Wars, I can't use that, okay? So when I post this to a blockchain, what I also want with an application is some sort of application that puts this picture up right here and it says, okay, for this character right here, for the pure Uruk, they're supposed to be purple skinned, okay? These guys are not purple skinned. These guys have red skin, okay? So you need to create somebody that has purple skin, but they're supposed to sort of look similar to, like, how these guys have, it almost looks like Egyptian or some sort of shit, like ancient armor and shit like that. That's what these guys are supposed to look like, the Uruk. They're one of the oldest species in the galaxy. But anyways, by putting this up on the blockchain and then having this file displayed on some sort of blockchain outside of the blockchain, like just somewhere on the internet, something like YouTube that would just display this as well as the work I need done for it, I can find other people who will help finish this project for me. And again, because we're talking about things in terms of Turing machines, I don't know if this project is even possible to be completed. Okay, this is one of those, this is an undecidable problem. Is this problem something that can be completed? Can someone take this idea? Again, I haven't given you guys all the information for this idea. This is just one picture for one character, or one page of one character for a book that's supposed to be a few hundred pages long. That's part of a project that is multiple multiple goods sold with one storyline, so it's a very small piece of this entire thing, but the entire question that I'm asking through this program that I'm trying to, or through this application on Bitcoin Cash that I would have created is, can you create a storyline like this for profit? Because again, even with something like that I've created, I can even tell somebody, look, you can change the name, you can change all of the writing here. Like if you just want to take the basic idea, like of all these different species I create and the sort of storyline, if you want to mix and match the ideas in your own special way, doesn't matter. Go ahead and do it. Just so long as you link it to my original transaction that created this, like I can even help you create your next storyline, okay? So this is where it gets really interesting, because now for creators of ideas, even before they have value, you will be able to trade these ideas, okay? Because right now, ideas, like if you come up with some sort of idea for a story, it's absolutely nothing until it has monetary value, and that's slightly different from physical goods. Physical goods have value before they're fully completed, and digital goods you can't really trade and things like that before they're fully completed. But something like this, because you can allow somebody to mix and match each item while still giving someone ownership over their original idea, that gets really interesting, because again, this is not only used for writing, but musicians could post things like, a song up to, like they could hash a song, put it on a blockchain, and say, hey, look, on some sort of outside application, they could post this song and be like, look, I'm a real good songwriter, but I'm not a very good musician. Someone should try and take this and make it big, because there's a lot of people out there that are like that, But anyways, I hope this sort of explained a little bit on the Turing Completeness side. I know it got a little bit long here, and I know there's two parts of this video. The first part, which just says, look, Turing Completeness, the way Vitalik Buterin and Nick Szabo use it, they're talking about, is the programming language Turing complete, and that's different than is Bitcoin a Turing machine. Bitcoin is a Turing machine, even if the programming language is not a Turing complete programming language. And you've got to remember, the original idea of a Turing machine kind of used humans as the computer, okay? And so that's also where I think, like, the second part of this talk is the idea that once you realize that a Turing machine doesn't need a Turing complete language, and the computer, like, even though the computer can like be a computer, like a digital computer off the blockchain that does have a Turing complete language, the computer can also be a human, okay? And the human part of Bitcoin, where you're actually doing human contracts but linking them through a blockchain, that's where it gets really interesting, because now you can place ownership of things, of digital things, where ownership never really applied all that well before, and you can place it, or you can do it very exactly. Like you can, in going back to my example of these Uruk people here, I can either tell someone, look, you can either create the artwork for my idea, or you can take my idea and steal it, or not necessarily steal it, but copy it, but then just have some sort of percentage that goes back to me, and then you can, change the sort of trivial ideas that aren't necessarily that big, like the name of the species. Like maybe you don't like the name Uruk. Maybe you don't like that they're purple skinned. Maybe you don't like the names of the different castes of their society. And then obviously there's more going through. Maybe if you read the whole thing, you wouldn't like their history background, the history of the species. But somebody else could take that idea, slightly alter it, so long as they still, because it's linked to me. The original transaction that posted on the blockchain is linked to me, and so then if they just slightly change it, instead of just trying to steal it, they could actually be like, hey, look, I'll just give you partial credit for what I'm going to change into my idea. You know what I mean? But anyways, those are the two parts of this discussion. So I hope it sort of explained Turing completeness, Turing machines, sort of Turing deciders. Turing deciders there's less information about, so I'm not nearly an expert on that topic. I'm doing my research though. But anyways, that's the end of this video. There will be more coming out soon.